The world ended in a scream of metal and the smell of burning fuel. Then, there was only the white silence. Baron shook his head, sending droplets of red flying into the snow. He was a massive Belgian Malinois, 80 pounds of muscle and drive, but right now the world was spinning. His left ear rang with a high-pitched whine, the echo of the explosion. He tried to stand. Pain shot through his back leg like a lightning bolt. A whimper caught in his throat, but he swallowed it. Work. Focus. Where is she? Baron ignored the pain. He pulled himself through the snow, dragging his injured leg. The scent of aviation fuel was overpowering, stinging his sensitive nose. But beneath the chemical stench, he found the scent he lived for. Vanilla. Gun oil. Sarah. His handler. She was 10 feet away, strapped into the twisted remains of the pilot's seat, which had been torn from the fuselage. The helicopter was a smoking skeleton, half buried in a snowdrift. Sarah was not moving. Baron crawled to her. He licked the frost gathering on her cheek. Her skin was cold. Too cold. A soft groan escaped her lips. Baron barked sharp, demanding, "Wake up." She didn't open her eyes. Her heartbeat was slow, a faint thump-thump that Baron could hear clearly in the frozen air. Suddenly, Baron's ears swiveled. The hair along his spine stood rigid. The wind was howling, but beneath the gale, he heard something else. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps, heavy boots breaking through the ice crust. Baron froze. He flared his nostrils, dissecting the wind. It wasn't the smell of rescue. It wasn't the clean scent of pine or snow. It was the scent of men who hunted. It smelled like adrenaline, cigarettes, and cold steel. They were coming from the valley floor, the same direction the bullets had come from before the sky fell down. Baron looked at Sarah. She was helpless. He looked at his shattered leg. He couldn't run. He couldn't carry her. But he could fight. Baron dragged himself between Sarah and the approaching sounds. He lowered his body into the snow, becoming a shadow in the whiteout. He bared his teeth. No longer a pet. No longer a partner. He was the last line of defense. The boots stopped 10 yards away. Baron pressed his belly flat against the ice. His coat, a camouflage of tan and black, blended perfectly with the charred debris scattered around the crash site. He slowed his breathing. Inhale, hold, exhale. He could smell them clearly now. 2 men. One smelled of peppermint tobacco and sweat-fear sweat. The other smelled of cold metal and confidence. "Visual on the bird!" a voice shouted over the wind. It was rough, distorted by a scarf. "Looks like a total loss. No movement." "Check for the body," the confident one replied. "And find the case. The boss wants the drive." They stepped closer. Crunch, crunch. Baron's muscles coiled. His injured leg throbbed with a dull, sickening rhythm, but the pain was distant now. Adrenaline had flooded his system, turning him into a weapon. The man smelling of tobacco walked past Baron's hiding spot behind a piece of the tail rotor. He didn't look down. He was looking at Sarah, who was slumped motionless in the snow. "She's here," the man yelled, raising a rifle. "Looks dead." "Make sure," the other voice commanded. The man raised his boot to nudge Sarah's shoulder. "Now!" Baron exploded from the snow. He didn't bark. He didn't warn. He launched himself like a missile. He hit the man in the chest, 80 pounds of fury slamming him backward. Baron's jaws snapped shut on the man's forearm, the teeth sinking through layers of winter clothing to find bone. The man screamed, a high, terrified shriek that pierced the storm. The rifle flew from his hands. Baron shook his head violently, thrashing the man like a rag doll. Protect, protect, protect. Get it off me! Shoot it! The man yelled, flailing in the snow. The second man, the confident one, spun around. He raised his pistol, aiming at the dark blur of the dog. Baron saw the movement. He released the arm and prepared to lunge again, to take the bullet meant for Sarah. Crack! A gunshot split the air, but it didn't come from the man with the pistol. The man's head snapped back. Red mist sprayed into the white wind. He dropped to his knees, then fell face forward into the drift, the pistol disappearing into the powder. The man Baron had pinned stopped fighting. He stared at his fallen partner, eyes wide with shock. Baron didn't pause. He growled, standing over the terrified man, his muzzle stained with blood that wasn't his own. He dared the man to move. Then, a new scent washed over the clearing. It came from the tree line. It smelled of wood smoke, gun oil, and pack. Baron turned his head, ears swiveling. From the white wall of the blizzard, 3 shapes emerged. First, 2 dogs, German shepherds, young, fast, moving with silent coordination. They flanked the crash site, cutting off any escape. Then, the man. He was tall, wearing white winter camouflage that made him look like a ghost. He held a long rifle with steady hands. He didn't look like the police. He didn't look like the men who had hunted them. He moved like a wolf. The stranger walked up to the man Baron was guarding. He looked down, his eyes cold and gray like the winter sky. "You're a long way from the road," the stranger said. His voice was deep, calm, and dangerous. The man on the ground stammered, holding his bleeding arm. We were just—" "Save it," the stranger said. He looked at Baron. Baron held his ground. He stood over Sarah, placing his body between her and this new arrival. He growled low, a warning. "She is mine." The stranger slowly lowered his rifle. He crouched down, making himself smaller. He didn't look Baron in the eyes, a sign of respect. He looked at Baron's injured leg, then at Sarah. "I'm not here to hurt her, soldier," the stranger whispered. "I'm here to take you home." He gave a soft whistle. The 2 younger dogs trotted over, tails low, sniffing the air. They didn't approach Baron aggressively. They stood at a respectful distance, acknowledging his rank. He is the alpha here. Baron felt the adrenaline beginning to fade. The pain in his leg roared back, sharper than before. His legs trembled. He looked at Sarah. She was still unconscious, the snow gathering on her eyelashes. He looked at the stranger. The stranger extended a hand, palm open. It smelled of leather and safety. Baron let out a long, shuddering breath. He licked the stranger's hand once. Then his strength gave out, and he collapsed into the snow beside his pilot. The journey back was a blur of darkness and floating. Baron drifted in and out of consciousness. He wasn't walking. He was being carried. The stranger, the man Baron now thought of as the White Wolf, had lifted him with surprising strength. Baron's head rested on the man's shoulder. The wool of the jacket smelled of pine needles and old gunpowder. It was a good smell, a safe smell. Behind them, Baron could hear the dragging sound of a sled. Sarah was on it. He could hear her shallow breathing over the howl of the wind. Thump, thump, she is still with us. Every step the man took jarred Baron's shattered leg, sending spikes of white-hot agony through his hip. But Baron didn't whimper. He gritted his teeth and pressed his nose into the man's collar. Endure. The pack is moving. Time lost its meaning. It could have been minutes or hours. The cold was a heavy blanket trying to put him to sleep forever. Then a sound. Creak. Slam. The wind stopped. The biting cold vanished, replaced by a wall of stagnant, dry air. Baron felt himself being lowered. He touched something soft, a fur rug. He opened his eyes. The world was no longer white. It was gold. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, throwing long, dancing shadows across the log walls. The air smelled of burning cedar and tea. Baron tried to lift his head. He needed to find Sarah. She was there, lying on a cot near the fire. The white wolf was kneeling beside her, his hands moving quickly but gently. He was wiping blood from her face with a warm cloth. Baron let out a low, raspy chuff. The man turned. He looked at Baron. His eyes were tired, but kind. "She's okay, soldier," the man whispered. "Stable, just cold, very cold." He stood up and walked over to Baron. Now the two younger dogs approached. They had been waiting in the shadows, respectful. The male scout crept forward first. He was sandy-colored, big-pawed, clumsy with youth. He stretched his neck out, sniffing Baron's injured leg. He whined softly, a sound of sympathy. "Hurt. You are hurt." The female. Nova was sharper, darker. She sniffed Baron's muzzle, smelling the blood of the man Baron had bitten. She licked Baron's ear once, quickly. "Warrior, you fought." The white wolf knelt beside Baron with a silver basin of water and a bottle that smelled sharp and stinging antiseptic. "This is going to hurt, buddy," the man said softly, "but I have to clean it." Baron watched the man's hands. He saw the knife cut away the matted fur. He saw the bottle tip. The liquid hit the wound. It felt like liquid fire. Baron's body seized. A growl ripped from his throat, involuntary and primal. His jaws snapped shut on air, inches from the man's face. The man didn't flinch. He didn't pull back. He just placed a heavy, calming hand on Baron's neck. "I know," the man murmured, his voice a low rumble. "I know, breathe." Baron looked into the man's gray eyes. He saw no fear. He saw only understanding. This man had been hurt before, too. He knew the price of survival. Baron exhaled. He relaxed his muscles. He let the man work. When it was done, the leg was wrapped in clean white gauze. The pain had dulled to a heavy throb. The man stood up and moved to the window. He peered out into the darkness through a crack in the shutters. The storm was still raging outside, beating against the logs like a furious beast denied entry. "Rest now," the man said to the room. Baron laid his head on his front paws. He watched Sarah's chest rise and fall. Up, down, up, down. Scout and Nova curled up on either side of him. They pressed their warm bodies against his, sharing their heat. They were strangers, but tonight they were a pack. Baron closed his eyes. The fire popped. The wind howled. He was safe. But in his dreams, he was back in the snow. And he knew with the certainty of a creature who hunts for a living that the men in the valley were not gone. They were just waiting for the sun. Morning arrived not with the sun, but with a shift in the gray. Baron woke to the smell of coffee. It was a sharp, bitter scent that cut through the lingering smell of antiseptic on his leg. He lifted his head. The pain in his hip was a dull, heavy ache now, like a bruise that went down to the bone. But he could stand. He pushed himself up, his claws clicking softly on the wood floor. Sarah was awake. She was sitting up on the cot, holding a tin mug. Her face was pale, the color of old paper, and a purple bruise bloomed across her temple. But her eyes were clear. "Baron," she whispered. He didn't limp. He flowed to her. He pressed his heavy head into her chest, closing his eyes as her fingers buried themselves in his ruff. He inhaled her scent deep into his lungs. She was alive. The pack was whole. "I thought I lost you, buddy," she choked out. The white wolf Jack was standing by the window. He was cleaning a rifle with a cloth. The smell of gun oil was strong again. "He saved you," Jack said without turning around. "Kept the coyotes off until I got there." Sarah looked at Baron, then her hand moved to his neck. Her fingers traced the heavy leather of his tactical collar. She checked the inner seam, her pulse quickening. Baron felt her heart rate spike. Thump, thump, thump. "It's still here," she said to Jack. "The drive. The proof." Jack turned. "They'll come for it. You know that." "I know." Baron didn't understand the words drive or proof, but he understood the tone. Threat. The collar around his neck wasn't just leather anymore. It was the reason the sky had fallen. It was the reason the bad men were hunting. Suddenly, Scout the young male dog let out a low woof from the door. Baron's head snapped around. His ears swiveled forward like radar dishes. A sound. Distant. Mechanical. Like a swarm of angry hornets buzzing deep in the valley. Jack moved instantly. He didn't run, he slid. He kicked snow over the fire, killing the light. He grabbed his rifle. "Engines," Jack said. "Snowmobiles, moving in formation." Baron felt the vibration in the floorboards. The hornet sound grew into a roar. Growl, roar, the enemy was here. Jack looked at Sarah. "Can you shoot?" "If I have to," she said, her voice tightening. "You will have to." Jack handed her a heavy black pistol. Baron moved between Sarah and the door. He ignored the fire in his leg. He lowered his head, his hackles rising into a rigid ridge along his spine. A deep, tectonic growl began in his chest, vibrating against Sarah's leg. "Let them come." The roar of the engines stopped abruptly outside the clearing. Silence rushed back in, heavy and suffocating. Then, a voice. It was amplified, booming through the wooden walls like the voice of a giant. "Jack Nolan!" the voice shouted. "We know you're in there!" Baron flattened his ears. He hated that voice. It smelled, even through the wood of deception. It was smooth, like oil on water. "We don't want to fight," the voice lied. "Just send out the officer and the dog. We just want the dog's collar." Sarah's hand tightened on Baron's fur until it hurt. Jack looked at her. He didn't speak. He just pointed to the back corner of the room, behind the heavy iron stove. "Cover." Sarah moved, dragging herself into the shadows. Baron followed, backing up, keeping his eyes on the door. Scout and Nova flanked them, their playful energy gone, replaced by the ancient instinct of the pack. "Last chance," the voice boomed. Jack stood by the window, motionless. He held up 3 fingers. 3. He lowered 1. 2. The air in the cabin grew thin, charged with electricity. Baron could smell the adrenaline pouring off Jack, acrid and sharp. 1. Crash. The front door didn't open. It exploded. Wood splintered inward. A canister flew into the room, hissing like a snake, spewing white smoke that burned Baron's nose. Gas. Men in white gear stormed through the smoke, black rifles raised. Baron didn't wait for a command. He didn't wait for the pain to stop. He launched himself into the gray fog. The smoke tasted like burning pepper. It stung Baron's eyes and throat, blinding him. But Baron didn't need to see. He followed the fear. He hit the first intruder chest high. The impact jarred his injured hip, sending a spike of agony up his spine. But Baron didn't let go. His jaws clamped onto the man's tactical vest, crushing the ceramic plate beneath. The man screamed, falling backward into the snow. "Get it off! Get the dog off!" Baron thrashed his head, a 80-pound anchor of fury. Hold, hold, protect. Gunfire erupted. Crack, crack, boom. It was deafening in the small cabin. Jack the white wolf was moving. Baron couldn't see him, but he heard the rhythm of his rifle. One shot, bolt rack, second shot, controlled, surgical. A second intruder loomed out of the smoke, raising a baton to strike Baron's head. Baron braced for the blow, but it never came. A smaller, darker blur shot across the room, Nova. The young female didn't go for the chest. She went for the ankle. She sank her sharp puppy teeth into the gap between the boot and the pant leg. The man yelled, stumbling sideways, his aim ruined. Then Scout joined the fray. He barked a deep, booming sound that sounded much bigger than he was and snapped at the man's hands. The pack was fighting. The pack was one. Baron released the first man and spun around. His bad leg buckled, but he forced himself up. He stood over Sarah, who was crouched behind the stove, her pistol raised, her hands steady. The smoke began to clear, sucked out by the shattered door. 3 men were down, but more were coming. Baron could see shadows moving in the clearing. Then the world shook. It wasn't an explosion. It was a vibration that rattled the pans on the wall and vibrated in Baron's teeth. Thwup, 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 thwup. A roar from the sky, a wind stronger than the blizzard. A beam of light, brighter than the sun, stabbed down from the heavens, pinning the bad men in the snow. "Federal agents!" A voice boomed from the sky, amplified by speakers that shook the trees. "Drop your weapons, now!" The men outside froze. The man on the floor, the one Nova was biting, dropped his baton. He smelled of defeat. Baron didn't stop growling. He looked at the door. Men in green uniforms dropped from the sky on ropes. They moved differently than the bad men. They moved like Jack. They smelled of discipline and authority. Jack lowered his rifle. He walked over to Baron and placed a hand on his head. "Stand down, soldier," Jack whispered. "It's over. We won." Baron looked at Jack, then at Sarah. Sarah was crying, but she was smiling. She holstered her gun and wrapped her arms around Baron's neck, burying her face in his fur. "Good boy," she sobbed. "Good boy." Baron let out a long, heavy sigh. The adrenaline drained away, leaving only the throbbing pain in his leg and a heavy exhaustion. He licked Sarah's cheek. Safe. 3 months later. The snow was gone. The ghost ridge was green, smelling of damp earth, pine resin, and wildflowers. Baron lay on the porch of the cabin. His leg was fully healed, though a jagged line of silver fur marked where the surgery had been. He didn't mind. Scars were just stories written on the skin. Scout and Nova were wrestling in the tall grass, chasing a butterfly. They were bigger now, their chests broad, their barks deeper. The cabin door opened. Sarah stepped out. She wore a new uniform, blue and crisp. She walked without a limp. Jack followed her out. He was carrying a duffel bag. Baron stood up. He knew what the bag meant. Departure. Jack walked down the steps. He knelt in front of Baron. The man smelled of the road again, but underneath that, he smelled of the pack. That scent would never fade. You take care of them, Baron, Jack said softly, scratching the sweet spot behind Baron's ears. You're the alpha now. Baron looked into the man's gray eyes. He didn't whine. He pressed his forehead against Jack's forehead for a long, silent second. I will watch. I will guard. Jack stood up and nodded to Sarah. He's ready. I know, Sarah said. Thanks to you. Jack slung the bag over his shoulder and began walking down the trail toward the waiting jeep. He didn't look back. Wolves don't look back. Baron watched him go until the jeep disappeared around the bend. He felt a pang of sadness, but it was small, because he wasn't alone. Sarah sat down on the steps. Come here, boy. Baron sat beside her. Scout and Nova ran up, collapsing in a heap of panting tongues and wagging tails. Baron looked out over the valley. The wind blew through the trees, carrying 1,000 scents: deer, rabbit, rain, and peace. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the mountain air. The storm was over. The winter was gone. Baron rested his head on his paws and closed his eyes, listening to the heartbeat of his pack.